back. Plenty of sunshine and feeling warmer for most Wednesday and Thursday.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you can spruce up your spring, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not one, but two sought-after designer watches. Make sure you don't miss out, as lines close on the 4th of April. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. The Metropolitan Police has breached the ancient principle of sanctuary in a place of worship as 20 officers raid a Quaker meeting. But would they behave like this in a mosque? The two-tier government judiciary showdown has resulted in the Sentencing Council caving in after the Prime Minister announced emergency legislation to stop preferential policies taking effect. As the government promises to crack down on the illegal migrant labour market, it emerges migrants overstaying their visas account for over a third of asylum claims. Plus, as the Trump trade war begins with the Prime Minister adamant he won't retaliate, quite right, I will be joined in the studio by former National Security Advisor to President Trump, John Bolton. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, Telegraph columnist Tim Stanley and former Labour MP Lloyd Russell-Moyle. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views on mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you very much. The top stories. GB News understands the Sentencing Council is to pause the controversial two-tier sentencing guidelines immediately, pending the introduction of emergency legislation, which the government is due to introduce to Parliament in the next 3 weeks. The Sentencing Council was due to bring in new rules around how judges should determine punishment for people from ethnic minority backgrounds. The new law to end two-tier justice will be published tomorrow. It's to stop two-tier sentencing rules discriminating against white men. However, the law won't be enforced until after Easter, as it won't have cleared both the Commons and the House of Lords. In other news, the Prime Minister has urged more than 40 countries gathering in London today to work together to stop people smuggling gangs and treat them in a similar way to terrorists. The UK and other countries affected by people smuggling must work together, the Prime Minister said, in a landmark summit aimed at cracking down on illegal migration. Countries, including Albania, Vietnam and Iraq, from where migrants have travelled to the UK, have been joining the talks alongside representatives from France, the US and China. Sir Keir Starmer added, since the government came to power, Labour have returned 24,000 people with no right to be in the country. The National Crime Agency released footage of key arrests, including those linked to a major Syrian organised crime group responsible for smuggling at least 750 migrants into the UK and Europe. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says the gangs undermine UK national security.
And we have countries from Vietnam, Iraq, Nigeria, as well as our nearest neighbours across Europe, France, Germany, and countries like the US and China, all facing real challenges from criminal gangs that try to exploit our borders in order to make huge profits, but agreeing today new law enforcement cooperation, intelligence sharing to go after these vile criminal gangs and to tackle this terrible trade in human beings.
In other news, Sir Ed Davey has launched his party's local election campaign today, saying it's a two-horse race between the Lib Dems and the Conservative Party. He said the Liberal Democrats were aiming to overtake the Tories as the second biggest party in local government, meaning there would be more Liberal Democrat-run councils than Conservative ones. The launch comes after the Conservatives promised lower taxes and better services. And Reform UK said they would fix broken Britain and potholes. Labour are expected to launch their campaign in the coming weeks. And the father of Prince Andrew accuser Virginia Giuffre says he's praying for his daughter after she claimed she has just days to live. The mother of 3 who was sex trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein and accused Prince Andrew of sexually abusing her when she was 17 says she's suffering kidney failure after a bus crash. Virginia shared a photograph from a hospital bed with her face covered in bruises, posting on Instagram she begged to see her children one last time. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, welcome back. What is going on in this country that there seems to be an extraordinary breakdown in the concept of policing by consent and defence of free speech? So what's happened? Well, last week the Metropolitan Police raided a Quaker meeting house to make 6 arrests. The Hertfordshire Police kept 2 people in custody for 8 hours to quiz them for being on a school WhatsApp group where they had criticised the school, and then told them and a counsellor not to get involved, otherwise the counsellor might be in trouble. And just today it's in the Times saying that the West Yorkshire Police have told a couple that they mustn't get in touch with one of their local councillors because that is harassment. So what is going on? First of all, with the poor old Quakers, and the Quakers are the most peaceable, easygoing people. They're not a dangerous bunch of criminals. They may sometimes break the law. I mean, the Penn refused to take his hat off, after all, in front of Charles II, so they have a history, sometimes even of bad manners. But that doesn't require 20 policemen to go into their place of worship. From the reign of Edward the Confessor to the reign of James I, just a few yards from here, there was a place of sanctuary by Westminster Abbey, which was inviolate even for criminals. There has long been a tradition in this country of taking the view that religious spaces should not be invaded by the forces of law and order unless absolutely necessary. And the question must arise, would the police have behaved thus if it had been a mosque rather than a Quaker meeting house? And could it possibly have been proportionate to send 20 policemen on this raid? And then let's move to Hertfordshire, because 6 police to arrest a single couple with no history of violence, not dangerous gangsters, not gangland criminals, not the mafia bosses of Hertfordshire, but perfectly law-abiding people who dared to criticise the bureaucracy, criticise their school. And this further intervention to tell an elected official not to intervene. What can be going on there? If you're an MP, you're protected, because anything you say in Parliament is protected, and the right to petition is a protected right under the Bill of Rights. Councillors don't have this protection, but they're part of the democratic system of our country, and the police should never be telling them not to get involved. It's their job to get involved. And then, of course, you have this latest case where a couple in West Yorkshire are told that they mustn't contact a councillor. What are councillors for, you may ask? It seems to me we need to promote freedom of speech and policing by consent. As ever, let me know your views via mailmog@gbnews.com. Well, I'm delighted now to have the MP for the Hertfordshire area where this couple were held, and then the councillor was told not to get involved, which seems to me even more concerning, because the police can obviously make a mistake, they can overreact, that will sometimes happen. But what can be the excuse for telling a councillor not to represent constituents?
Well, I think something has gone very badly wrong in this case, on a number of grounds. First of all, if you speak to any of my constituents, one of the first things they'll say to you is, if my house is burgled, I can't rely on the police to turn up. If you speak to a shop owner, they'll say, I don't bother phoning the police if there's been a shoplifting offence because I can't rely on the police to turn up. And yet in this case, the police were able to find not 1, but 6 officers to come and arrest these 2 people in question, who it appears all they had done was to question. Now, everyone has a right to question, and people can cause offence, but that should not be a matter for the police. And indeed, that goes to my second overarching concern, which is about the sort of overreach that we've seen here. Because one of the great traditions of this country is we can be free to express our views in a vibrant fashion without worrying about the state looking over our shoulder, and certainly not through the vehicle of the police. And for that to extend, as you say, to an elected official, both a councillor, and indeed I was copied into this email as well. And Jacob, you say that I'm protected. I'm protected in the House of Commons. Yes. Theoretically, I'm not protected outside the Commons. Now, I wasn't necessarily going to take any notes of this, and fortunately this wasn't passed on to me. But for me, the point is, how on earth could a police officer feel that this was a remotely appropriate thing to say?
Because as an elected official, you have a responsibility actually to represent people even if they're guilty. There may be miscarriages, there may be mistakes made, and people come to you in surgeries or they contact you, and you have an obligation to make sure that everything has been done properly, and the police should never interfere in that part of the democratic process.
Well, you see, for me, this illustrates a more fundamental problem. How have we as a culture in this country got to the point where an officer should think that would be a remotely sensible thing to do? Now, I'm genuinely not blaming the individual officer. I know what pressures they are under, and I've spoken to the Chief Constable about this, and he's a new Chief Constable. I'm convinced that he is focused on policing the public's priorities. But the fact that this came to pass in the first place, that we are in a situation where the police should feel that they have a duty to police offence rather than to police actual breaches of the law. When so many breaches of the law, the police say they don't have the resources to turn up. That is a deeply worrying phenomenon.
And that's what's upsetting the public, that, as you were saying, they see shoplifting being ignored. If they're burgled, nobody comes round. And then 6 police officers turn up to arrest a couple merely because they've complained about the headmaster's pay or whatever it was, or the appointment of a new headmaster. it was ordinary criticism within daily life. It was ordinary exercise of free speech. Who's telling them to do this? It can't be that individual policemen are deciding this is sensible. There must be some direction from above.
Well, I actually think it's a cultural issue with what the police see their role as being. I'll give you another example of this. On Remembrance Sunday, I went to the Remembrance service at Posbar. You remember when you're a Member of Parliament, the Member of Parliament participates in a Remembrance service. And I saw these gentlemen wearing fluorescent jackets trying to stop the traffic. And I spoke to them and they said, oh, we've had to do this as volunteers now because the police say they don't have the resources to be able to stop the traffic for the Remembrance Parade. Yet at that very same time, in neighbouring Essex Constabulary, as many of your viewers will know, the police were knocking on the door of Alison Pearson, a Telegraph journalist, to query tweets that she'd made. And for me, this is the lesson that comes out of all the cases that you've talked about. How, as a society, do we rebalance this? So the police are very clear in the direction they're having from the government, from Parliament, from political leaders who are elected to represent the public, that this is where we expect their focus to be, on burglary, shoplifting, knife crime and so on, and we don't expect them to be policing offence. And I think, for me, that is the lesson that comes out of this incident.
And that's a matter of leadership, because when I was in Parliament, I regularly spoke to the police around the Palace of Westminster. You could not find a more sensible, diligent group of people. It's not the bobby on the beat, it's the leadership that is letting them down, and ultimately there must be some political responsibility.
Of course there shouldn't, and Jacob, you and I both served in successive Conservative governments. We have to, all of us have to say, how has this come to pass under both governments of the Labour persuasion? They've been in power for 9 months, but we were in power for a considerable period of time before that. But however this arose, with every passing month, it becomes clearer there is a fundamental issue here, and we need to have a fundamental rebalancing about what we expect the police to do and not to do. We shouldn't be putting individual officers, often very young officers, in the situation where they're having to make these judgments. I think we need a much clearer sense of direction.
Well, so Oliver, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Peter, how can you defend the police, which you must want to do? I naturally want to defend the police when they're being so heavy-handed and not getting people's priorities right.
Well, the Quaker building issue is a very, very different story from the Hertfordshire issue. They're completely different and should not be conflated. Youth Demand use those premises to have a meeting. Youth Demand are a group with a publicly avowed intent to disrupt traffic and cause other disruption and break the law, essentially. So, and no place of worship should be a sanctity for lawbreakers.
But there's got to be a proportionality, hasn't there? That they could have arrested them when they left or something like that. Bursting into a place of worship is heavy-handed.
It's always better to catch somebody in the act. But we need to be very careful here because people remain on bail as a result of that police search, so I don't want to jeopardise any potential investigation in regards to that. But it's a very different story from the Hertfordshire abomination, which is, of course, utterly appalling. Now, policing since 1997 or thereabouts, when Tony Blair said education, education, ambitious police officers said to themselves, I'll have a bit of that. And off they went, and they got their degrees, and they have done successively since then. And all the corridors of power now are populated by essentially people who regard themselves as academics. And they have allowed policing to be in the grip of academia. 47 universities now offer policing degrees. And any experienced, pragmatic police officer will tell you, you need common sense, you need communication skills, and most of policing can't be learnt from books.
Indeed, and it needs to be proportionate. So to come back to the Quakers, you really need 20 policemen to go and arrest a few biddies who are at a Quaker meeting. It just seems so... It's the heavy-handedness and the point that Oliver was making, that if you are reporting a shoplifting crime or you've been burgled, nobody comes. And then there are 20 police to arrest. I mean, they may make a nuisance of themselves, the environmentalist people, but they're not fundamentally dangerous.
Environmentalists can actually be very dangerous. We only have to look at Just Stop Oil, for example, and their antics with gluing themselves to roads and the such like, trying to damage priceless artefacts like the Magna Carta and throwing soup over priceless paintings, picking on sporting events. They fundamentally proved they were the enemy of the people in every regard. Should any other protest group want to fill their boots, then it's absolutely right that the police are robust and prevent as much as they can, and where the law is broken, they act accordingly.
All right, well, we've had a right of reply from the Metropolitan Police. Youth Demand have stated an intention to shut down London over the month of April using tactics including swarming and roadblocks. While we absolutely recognise the importance of the right to protest, we have a responsibility to intervene to prevent activity that crosses the line from protest into serious disruption and other criminality. On Thursday, the 29th of March, officers raided a Youth Demand planning meeting and address in Westminster. That happens to be the Quaker Meeting House, where those in attendance were plotting their April action. Well, I think you can still ask the question of whether they'd have done it in a mosque. Anyway, thank you very much to Peter and to Oliver. And after the messages from our sponsors, I'll be talking to Suella Braverman about the government judiciary showdown over two-tier rules, which has taken a surprising turn of events. Thank you.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
I spoke with one of the most inspirational ladies I've ever spoken to today. Her story will stop you in her tracks. Ladies and gents, this is Tina Nash.
Basically, I met Shane Jenkin back in 2009. Basically, he was very, very sweet to me for the first, I'd say 4 or 5 months. And I really fell for him. I've never really been in love properly until I met him. I was laying across the bed with my legs hanging off the bed, and I was wrapped up in my duvet. And next thing you know, I had hands through the duvet, start strangling me.
What had he done to you?
He'd come in, he'd beaten me unconscious. My head was twice the size of what it should have been, broken nose, broken jaw. And basically, when I was unconscious, he gouged my eyes out with his bare thumbs. I didn't know that I was blind until... basically, on that third time that I come back round after he'd knocked me unconscious, when I come back round, I knew that he was trying to kill me then. That is when I knew what he was doing.
Have your eyes recovered? Can you see anything anymore or not?
I haven't got any eyes. These are glass eyes. They're not even real. They're glass.
He was sent to prison, wasn't he? He got a life sentence.
Yeah. With a minimum, of 6 years minimum term.
And that was in 2012?
It was, and the judge said that he had to prove himself fit on a landing for 6 years with no medical intervention before he is even accepted to be allowed out on the streets. This has not happened.
Goodness me. And am I right now in thinking, Tina, that he's essentially in what most people would know to be an open prison?
Yeah, he's in Cat D.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg. After the government told GB News it will pass emergency legislation to stop controversial Sentencing Council guidelines that would impose two-tier rules on offenders, the Sentencing Council has caved in. Early this evening, the Council issued a statement revealing it would delay the guidelines implementation while maintaining the policy is necessary and appropriate. Sounds particularly silly of them. Well, I'm joined now by the barrister Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, thank you very much for joining me today. Lord Justice Davis must be feeling a bit of a silly old goose this evening, or a silly old gander.
Well, I think that they've probably done the politic thing here, and given that David Gauke is reporting probably May, June on his sentencing report and criminal justice report, they're probably going to wait for that to come out before they, reinvigorate their guidelines, shall we say. And they may well amend them based on what David Gauke comes back with, but I think it's entirely diplomatic of them to have done this, given the furore over it and the risk that Parliament was going to start stepping in to judicial shoes in terms of dictating sentencing policy.
Well, Parliament does dictate sentencing policy, though, doesn't it? Because it sets out in legislation what sentences should be and says that if you're found guilty of committing murder, you get an automatic life sentence. That's the proper role of Parliament, is to set the sentence. It's the individual judges to apply it in individual cases, and that the Sentencing Council is some middle area.
Well, the Sentencing Council in many ways, and certainly in respect of this, is how to impose sentences and how to go about the sentencing process. And that is what has caused all of the furore, because they recommended that those groups, the 5 groups, should all have a pre-sentence report. And that is all the furore is over. That does not mean that judges will always order a pre-sentence report. They tend to be used on cases where there is a decision to be made over the threshold between custody and a community sentence. And then also it really does inform the judge on what sort of community rehab or community sentence is going to work best for that particular offender. So the pre-sentence report is an extremely valuable tool for the judge. But what you don't want is a case where the pre-sentence report is used as a relitigating of the defence on behalf of the defendant. And that's what judges do avoid. So, I am concerned about this because the Labour Party did set up the Sentencing Council. The Conservative Party, the Conservative government, cooperated with the current Sentencing Council. Nothing was said about these recommendations. And now everybody's shouting about two-tier sentencing and two-tier care. I think that it's reducing it all down to a spat when really, the Sentencing Council is an extremely capable, expert council of people who basically do know what they're doing. And so...
All right. Well, that's a very good, noble defence of them, Rebecca. Thank you very much for joining me and putting it for them on what probably isn't their easiest day, so thank you. Well, with me now is the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. Suella, thank you very much for coming in. Should the Sentencing Council just be abolished?
Well, characteristically, you may say, Jacob, I am in favour of scrapping the Sentencing Council. I think this instance is an egregious example of its approach to sentencing.
And the stunningly arrogant letter that Lord Justice Davis sent to the Lord Chancellor, saying basically, I don't care what you think, I'm independent, I'll do what I like. He must feel pretty stupid today, and deserves to feel pretty stupid today, because he's bungled.
Yeah, he's been forced into an embarrassing U-turn only days after he was facing down the Justice Secretary. So just in terms of judgment at the top of this organisation, I think serious questions need to be asked. But these sentencing guidelines that they put forward were their creation and, are unfair, differential, discriminatory, racist and sexist.
Well, that's right, because the only people who weren't going to get a pre-sentence report were white Christian males. Everyone else, you would have a report.
Absolutely, and that would have put white Christian males at a severe disadvantage when it came to sentence. Just imagine the case. You and I stood accused and convicted of the same crime.
The thought that you could commit a crime,
Well,
Suella, is one our viewers will not be able to cope with. But
ditto towards you, Jacob. But imagine that, just because by virtue of our different ethnicity, different faith, different gender, we would be treated differently in the eyes of the law, I think is incredibly unfair and a very ugly stain on our rich justice system in this country.
And the basic principle that everyone is equal in front of the law. And pre-sentencing reports mainly, not exclusively, but mainly lead to lower sentences, don't they? They lead to more lenient sentences because of understanding the difficulties somebody has faced.
Yes, absolutely. And the Sentencing Council, as you rightly point out, Parliament sets the limits of sentences, the maximum and the minimum sentences afforded to each particular offence. But in between that, there's a whole range of sentences, custodial and non-custodial, which can be handed down by a judge, taking into account different features of the offence, the offending, the offender's history. All sorts of factors do need to be taken into account by judges, and rightly so. But when it comes to affording greater weight to someone's ethnicity or their gender or their transgender status or their faith, I think that crosses a line and becomes wholly unfair and inequitable.
And isn't there a fundamental problem with the Sentencing Council? Is that actually it is in itself an attack on judicial independence, because it tries to force judges all to think and behave in the same way, and tries to impose the judgment of bureaucracy over and above that of the judge who has heard the individual case.
Well, that's another reason why I do think it should be scrapped, and that the responsibility for sentencing guidelines should be taken back to ministers, and ministers would then be more accountable, because at the end of the day, these are largely unknown individuals. They're unelected. They are they wield great power ultimately in our criminal justice system, which can make the difference between freedom or custody for many, many people. That's immense power and influence in the criminal justice system. I think it's only right that those decisions should be absorbed into the executive, and thereby allowing ministers to be held directly to account in Parliament.
And allow the judges to get on with their job and be independent of each other, so that you don't have judicial groupthink, which is just as a threat to judicial independence as ministers interfering in individual cases, which nobody is proposing. And that's very important, isn't it? The Sentencing Council, and if that were replaced by ministerial discretion, would never interfere in individual cases. It's just a follow-through of the broad parameters set down by Parliament.
Absolutely. Sentencing guidelines really influence the kinds of sentences that are issued. But of course, judges must retain the discretion to hand down an individual decision on sentencing on an individual offender in any particular cases. That must not be interfered with by ministers under any circumstances. But these sentencing guidelines can really change the type of sentences that people get. And I think we could lead, if they were taken back to ministers, the responsibility was taken back by ministers, there would be, we could restore a bit more confidence in sentencing, which is severely lacking right now.
Is today a good day for the British Constitution? Because it's shown that Parliament is sovereign, and this is recognised even by quangos, and that when a quango is threatened with outright abolition or having its wings clipped, it actually responds. It takes quite a lot of pressure and the reality that the Constitution can still work. But it's a good day for the King in Parliament.
I think that's one way of looking at it. I think it's credit must go to my colleague, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, who exposed these guidelines a few weeks ago through his own diligence and, created the campaign to get the Sentencing Council to U-turn. He issued legal action, or threatened to issue legal action. His deadline for a response from the Sentencing Council was 5 p.m. today. I don't think we would be even having this discussion were it not for a Member of Parliament, the Shadow Justice Secretary, identifying this problem and challenging the government and the Sentencing Council directly.
Indeed, but that does lead to a slightly tougher question for both of us, doesn't it? Is that we were in charge for 14 years. The Sentencing Council was only just set up in 2010 before we came in. We did nothing to abolish it. We clearly appointed these people to it who don't know which way is up, or however you want to put it. And we can't avoid the blame for this because it was under discussion whilst we were in office, and it's as if the Justice Department ministry goes on its own way, didn't really care who the ministers were. It's part of the power of the bureaucracy, regardless of who's in charge. And it's only when the spotlight of publicity focuses on one issue that you can actually get some sensible decision-making.
I think that is right. You know, we have to bear our portion of the blame that it got to this point, and we didn't take any meaningful steps to reform the Sentencing Council when we had the chance. But I think that, you know, ultimately we're dealing with many problems which we failed to resolve. You know, I tried to speak out against two-tier policing at the time because of the differential treatment that the police were taking towards pro-Hamas or pro-Gaza protesters vis-à-vis other protesters, you know, far less proactive than they were, as we saw last summer, towards the Southport rioters. You know, there has been a differential approach applied throughout the criminal justice system. These sentencing guidelines, this example of two-tier justice, I'm afraid, is the tip of the iceberg. We've got countless examples of where there really hasn't been an equal approach, depending on who the offender is. And I think that there are many, many avenues for radical reform because public confidence is at rock bottom.
I agree with that, and let's hope we don't get arrested for saying these things and have Rosas at our door when we get home. Anyway, thank you, Suella. In a moment, we'll be looking at the biggest crisis behind the UK's asylum crisis, and it's not the Channel crossings.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. We continue to stay unsettled across central and eastern parts of the Mediterranean with further heavy showers and thunderstorms, some localised flooding possible. Through Monday, we can see across much of Greece into Italy those heavy downpours continuing, some brisk winds, feeling quite cold too, but drier further west into Spain and Portugal, sunny spells before heading over to Madeira where there'll be some showers here, and largely dry across the Canary Islands. Over the next few days, it stays fairly similar, temperatures in the sunshine reaching the low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
No, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new Royal Newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, nearly every day we see the picture of migrants crossing the English Channel from France to apply for asylum in the UK. It may surprise you to hear that these people do not represent the largest group of those applying for asylum. New Home Office figures have revealed it is those who arrive on visas and overstay them. Today, the government announced plans to try to crack down on illegal migrant labour. But considering we're now at record levels of channel crossings for this time of the year, is there any serious hope of Labour ending the migrant crisis? Well, I'm joined now by my brilliant panel, Tim Stanley and Lloyd Russell-Moyle. Lloyd, the Home Secretary has said it's all the weather, it's not her fault. She's as bad as Rachel Rees, looking for somebody else to blame, isn't she?
Well, this story is about people who aren't coming over on crossings.
Yeah, but on the crossings, she said it was all the weather.
Well, we all know that it does go up and down in the weather, and it takes a few years...
Just up when it's Labour. Does Labour give us better weather?
Well, that's not historically true. In '97, Labour inherited an historic both asylum and illegal asylum routes. At those days, it was mainly through trucks and the Eurotunnel. Record high, almost equivalent to what we see today. It did take, at that time, a Labour government to turn that curve around about 4 or 5 years. I expect this government to have to take 4 years to turn that curve around. But they did it last time when the Tories ruined the migration system, and they'll probably do it
actually,
again.
when Michael Howard left office as Home Secretary, migration was under pretty good control.
No, asylum applications
there was a rise in
were
it,
record high, yeah.
But let's
if we talk about
case.
the two-thirds, or the overstays, well, that, of course, is what you expect, surely, because there are no legal routes to this country if you're an asylum seeker, none whatsoever. The Ukraine route's shut, and it was never an asylum application route anyway, so they're not classed in the numbers. They're just migrants. The Syrian route's shut. If you're an Irani political attacked for your political beliefs, attacked because you're a woman that doesn't want to wear the headscarf, but have links to the UK, say you studied years before in the UK, or you've got plenty of money and you'll be entrepreneurial when you come to the UK, the only way you can get here is either crossing illegally on a boat, which none of us want to see people doing, or to come here on a visa and to overstay. There is no other route for an asylum seeker.
So we need to make it harder to get visas?
No, we need to have a proper process for people to apply.
No, we don't, because there are hundreds of millions of people who come here. The numbers are just insupportable.
Give a number. Put a number in and say, this is the number. Well, you want 0 asylum seekers in this country? I think that's completely heartless and ridiculous.
Heartless, but we've had far too many in the last few years.
We've had less than most other European countries.
I don't care about other European countries. I want to model ourselves on Trump and close the border. Come on, Tim.
Not even Trump closed the border. Not even Trump closed the border.
I agree with you, but come on.
We've got to have 0. We have had far too many in recent years.
But there are countries with which we are, in principle, in conflict, which we describe as dictatorships, which we advocate the change of regime.
What, are we going to take 1 billion people from China?
No.
What about
they don't wish to come here. But what if
what about the Uyghurs? We can't take all of these people.
No, we can't take all of them, but we could possibly take some of them.
No, we can't.
We could take a certain share of people who are fleeing dictatorship or...
We're full.
Jacob, what about people who have helped the British Embassy in those countries? People like those Afghan interpreters. They helped Britain.
Of course, people who serve the Crown. They're different category.
So of course, I'm sorry, your 0 has already started. This is typical of people like you, Jacob. Your 0 has started already to creep up. And what will happen is other morals will get into that process. Well, of course, about these group of people and these group of people. And that's the problem, isn't it? You have to set a reasonable number, and you refuse to do it because politicians are weak and refuse to set a reasonable number.
Our number needs to be 0. I've set the number.
That is not a reasonable number.
Mathematicians may say 0 is a number.
You set the number and then you undermined it.
Let's Stanley get a wet edge race.
I feel like wet Middle England stuck in the middle here because I think it's decades of rule by people like you to letting anyone in.
The Conservatives are the ones that let every Tom, Dick and Harry in. We're controlling
it should be
it
a
properly.
limited control but reasonable number.
That's what Labour's
because
doing.
things got out of control that now the new political flavour of the month is people like Jacob saying, let no one in.
But Conservatives
we not
lifted
just have
the cap
a
in numbers.
well-controlled system that allows some in who are under desperate
It's got to be
circumstances?
zero for the next 5 years,
right,
to allow the numbers that we've already got to be dealt with, processed, and the illegal ones removed.
If you're talking about economic migration, I would agree with you. If you're talking about asylum, I cannot agree with you from a Christian point of view.
We are never the first country of arrival for asylum seekers.
No, we're not, but then...
Therefore, they should stay where they arrive.
No, but when it comes to any question, any moral question of charity, you don't just act on the basis of that person came directly to me first.
Those are the rules under which we operate.
What side of the road? What side of the road were you? Oh, I'm only Good Samaritan if they're on my side of the road because I won't cross.
Several people walk past. This Good Samaritan could well have said, well, you know, it was really the responsibility of the person who first walked past that man. Look after him.
I'm surprised.
On a Catholic quoting the Bible rather than listening to the authority and magisterium of the Church, we must end that discussion. In a moment, I will be speaking to Donald Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton. It'll be a fascinating discussion. You won't want to miss a word of it.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. If you enjoyed the sunshine today, well, there's more to come tomorrow and indeed for the next few days. A bit fresh first thing tomorrow morning, but feeling warm by the afternoon. It's not been sunny everywhere today. We've had this weather front, which is now clearing away from northern Scotland, but high pressure has generally been dominant and it will continue to control our weather, bringing many places clear skies overnight. Quite a lot of cloud earlier across Northern Ireland. That's now moving away and the cloud breaking up across Scotland. Increasing chance of some mist and low cloud, maybe a bit of fog forming over parts of the Midlands and eastern England, where temperatures will dip down close to freezing to 3 or 4 Celsius. That's in towns and cities. A bit milder across the southwest, where there will again be a fairly noticeable breeze blowing tomorrow. And it will be a bit breezier around the coasts of Scotland, perhaps just a little bit of ha on the east coast at first, and maybe some cloudy skies to begin with across Shetland. But generally for Scotland and Northern Ireland, far less in the way of cloud tomorrow compared to today. Could start a bit drab over parts of the Midlands, maybe northern England, some mist, low cloud, bit of fog here, maybe East Anglia too, but any mist and fog should clear certainly by mid-morning. And then we're looking at, well, spectacular spring sunshine, really almost wall to wall. There will be a chilly breeze blowing across southern England and South Wales and a bit breezy across western Scotland, Northern Ireland, and perhaps still on the east coast too. And if that breeze is coming in from the North Sea, you'll notice it. Temperatures pegged back as a result. But inland, in the sunshine, 17, 18 degrees, maybe a touch warmer across the northwest of Scotland. Similar day on Wednesday. Again, most places fine and with lots and lots of sunshine. Still a bit breezy in the south and a bit more of a breeze maybe on some of those North Sea coasts. Just a threat of some of that low cloud drifting in. That's going to be more of a feature later in the week, but look at that. Plenty of sunshine and feeling warmer for most Wednesday and Thursday.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Wednesday, in what is being dubbed Liberation Day in the United States, the Trump administration will implement new tariffs, a 25% tax on all cars entering the United States. It's been forecast that these tariffs, expected hit the likes of Bentley and Rolls-Royce, could cost our economy 1% of GDP. But Donald Trump's methods of disruption go far beyond tariffs, and I asked former National Security Advisor to Donald Trump, John Bolton, about this earlier on today. Well, Ambassador John Bolton, thank you very much for joining me on GB News. I'm hoping you can explain what is going on at the United States at the moment, domestically and in foreign affairs. From a British perspective, a lot of what's happening domestically seems quite exciting, that the borders are being dealt with, that woke is being got rid of. Really positive steps are being taken. How do you view it from your perspective?
Well, I think from the perspective of people who supported President Trump and many who did not, the woke ideology has been nothing but bad news. And I think it's one of those 80-20 issues where, as a political leader, you want to be on the 80% side, and I think that's where Trump is, and I think he's made a lot of progress. I think immigration is another success story for Trump, which consists mostly of overruling what the Biden administration did. Americans, I think, is another 80-20 proposition that illegal immigrants who have committed crimes should be deported. That's just not an issue people are going to argue about. We'll see later if the deportations get more extensive. But as of now, I think these are winners for Trump and have strong support domestically.
And the DOGE agenda, they're getting rid of extravagance, closing whole departments. That's real activity. It's taking on the American blob and winning for democracy.
Well, again, I think most voters see this as a plus. Ronald Reagan wanted to abolish the Department of Education 45 years ago and didn't make it. I think this time it will happen. I do think there's some argument that the bull in the China shop approach will have costs that are not appreciated, but that's probably because I'm a government alumnus and I see what the damage is. Overall, Americans want to see the government cut. They want to see the budget reduced. They want to see our deficit down, and they want the national debt reduced. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but at least this is a start. That's how most people feel.
But it's certainly been a bull in China shop approach, hasn't it? And lots of things have got broken, and some things have happened that may turn out to be unconstitutional or may get overturned at a later stage.
Yeah, that will play out. It may be that some agencies are dismantled, then put back together again. It might have been done differently, but these are things people in Washington argue about pretty much. Out in the rest of America, they just like to see their tax dollars well spent, and they don't like to see them wasted.
But when you come to the bull in the China shop to foreign affairs, it seems to be much more ad hoc. The domestic affairs approach seems to be very well constructed, well thought through, with a clear ultimate objective. What is the ultimate objective in foreign affairs? Because that's much harder to work out.
Yeah, I think in domestic affairs, a lot of what Trump is doing is what 95% of Republicans and conservatives would want doing it. Maybe not exactly the way they would do it, but in substance, very consistent with what the base of the party wants. Foreign affairs, it's very different because Trump doesn't have a philosophy there. He doesn't have a national security grand strategy. He really doesn't even do policy. This is where his transactional nature really comes in. And a lot of it's driven by Trump's desire to see Donald Trump in the center of attention. And I'm very much afraid that neither he nor his advisors are thinking through the implications of a lot of what he's doing. For example, with respect to Ukraine, the NATO alliance, and certainly not in the economic field looking at the tariffs.
Well, with Ukraine, it seems to me the biggest risk for America is for Putin to appear to be successful, because if you say that sovereign borders can be crossed without consequence and you can gain from doing it, there are other dictators around who may learn from that, and that it is an American interest, an economic American interest, to have stable global borders.
I think that's 100% correct, and there's no capital that's following this more closely than Beijing, looking at what they may do to Taiwan, what they may do in the South China Sea or along their land borders with Southeast Asia and India. Trump sees international affairs as largely dictated by his personal relations with the head of a foreign government. So he thinks he's friends with Vladimir Putin, and therefore that means the U.S. and Russia have good national relations. That's not true. And by the way, Putin doesn't see Trump as his friend. As a former KGB agent, he sees somebody he can manipulate, and I'm afraid that's exactly what he's doing regarding Ukraine right now.
Putin doesn't have friends, does he? Dictators of that kind do not have friends. They have people who work for them and people who oblige them.
Yeah, I first met Putin in October of 2001, shortly after 9/11, have met him any number of times since then. I thought the first time I met him, he was 2 years into the presidency of Russia. I thought he was about as cold-blooded a man as I have ever met. He knows what he thinks Russia's national interests are. He may be right or wrong about that, but he knows what he wants, and he thinks he's achieving it, and he thinks he can get it through Trump. And that's very disturbing. People saw the famous Zelensky-Trump-Vance meeting in the Oval Office, which was, I think, a catastrophe for Zelensky, certainly, but for the West as a whole. And nobody watches it more frequently on reruns than Vladimir Putin.
And then you come to the foreign economic policy. Now, I think tariffs are utter madness. They harm the country that imposes it more than anybody else. I'm hoping the UK won't retaliate, not because I'm a soft touch, but because it will harm British voters and British consumers. Why does Trump want to harm his own voters by putting prices up?
For several reasons. First, he does not understand how tariffs work. In the first term, I heard people like the Secretary of the Treasury, the Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and others explain to him the foreigners do not pay the tariffs. The American importer pays the tariffs and then tries to pass that on to consumers. And he simply would not take the point on board. In his State of the Union message just a few weeks ago, he said it's time for the foreigners to start paying. If I thought the foreigners were paying, I might think better of tariffs myself, but they don't. It's a hidden tax on the American people. And in a trade war, everybody who's engaged in it ends up worse off. It's really economic illiteracy what he's about to do, but he can do it by himself. He doesn't need congressional approval, at least he will argue that when it's litigated in court, and he can make up his mind and change it from day to day, which is classic Trump. So it's not only the problem of the tariffs themselves, it's the uncertainty that's been introduced into corporate and government planning all over the world now.
But isn't there a lesson from history in this, that in the 1930s when tariffs were applied, people didn't know how damaging they were? We now know that that was part of the cause of the Depression in the United States. This is really bad economic policy that risks the American economy more than anybody else.
Yeah, look, one disadvantage of not having trade wars more often is we don't have any veterans. You know, they don't remember Smoot-Hawley, as you say, which did lead to the Great Depression after the crash of '29. We're going to learn that lesson, hopefully not as bad as we learned it in the 30s. But in the meantime, a lot of people are going to suffer. Many of them, the consumers who will see higher prices in the United States, are Trump's base. The people who voted for him, maybe somewhat hesitatingly, but they were afraid of inflation. They were afraid of the uncertainty under the Biden administration. And if those problems aren't corrected, if indeed new problems arise, that will cost Trump in his approval rating, and it will cost Republicans potentially quite significantly in the 26 midterm elections.
Ambassador, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
This complicated situation. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Well, that was the former National Security Advisor to Donald Trump, John Bolton. And next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, you've got an exciting show this evening, and I understand you're even going to be telling us about the weather in Somerset, which is going to be beautiful, I hear, tomorrow.
Yes, well, absolutely it is. Loads on tonight, Jacob. So why is it that there's been a collection of British MPs who seem to care more about an airport in Pakistan than whether or not their residents get their bins taken out or potholes filled in? I'm also going to be asking whether or not this year especially we appear to have had a bit of an obsession with Ramadan and Eid. Meanwhile, there's been a curtailment of various different Christian festivals and celebrations. A Labour MP has claimed expenses for her dog, believe it or not. Is this the new expenses scandal? A Tory MP has been contacted by police and threatened because he was standing up for a constituent that got a knock on the door by police over WhatsApp messages. All of that, of course, comes on the day that we are being told that there is no such thing as two-tier justice. Two-tier justice has been stopped by dear Keir Starmer. And Prince Harry has been accused of harassment and bullying by the lead of his former charity. So we're going to be talking about all of that. But now it is your weather in glorious Somerset.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. If you enjoyed the sunshine today, well, there's more to come tomorrow and indeed for the next few days. Bit fresh first thing tomorrow morning, but feeling warm by the afternoon. It's not been sunny everywhere today. We've had this weather front, which is now clearing away from northern Scotland, but high pressure has generally been dominant and it will continue to control our weather, bringing many places clear skies overnight. Quite a lot of cloud earlier across Northern Ireland. That's now moving away and the cloud breaking up across Scotland. Increasing chance of some mist and low cloud, maybe a bit of fog forming over parts of the Midlands and eastern England, where temperatures will dip down close to freezing to 3 or 4 Celsius. That's in towns and cities. A bit milder across the southwest, where there will again be a fairly noticeable breeze blowing tomorrow. And it will be a bit breezier around the coasts of Scotland, perhaps just a little bit of half.